Live streaming is on.
Hello, world. Actually, we're here in the Global Theater. Hello. And this is McLuhanMashUp. My name is Gerry Fialka. It's February 5, 2021. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Clinton Ignatoff and Bill Kuhns. Now, Bill, pronounce your last name better than I did.
Kuhns rhymes with prunes.
Oh, Kuhns rhymes with prunes. I should know that. That's one of Frank Zappa's greatest songs is about prunes. So we've got McLuhanMashUp's motive and aspiration is to talk about Marshall McLuhan in layperson's terms, not that highbrow academia in that lexicon that so many people confuse. So we've actually changed the name all the time to McLuhanMashUp or McLuhan Makeup or McLuhanMashUp, like the mosh pit where Andrew McLuhan was a punk rocker. And at the end of one of his shows, he looked into the mosh pit and there was a copy of Understanding Media, the book, on the floor of a sweaty, ugly, beery rock club. Can you believe that? So it's an honor and a pleasure.
His grandfather would have appreciated that.
His grandfather would have. And you know this other amazing story about Andrew McLuhan. I'm sorry to relay this, but it is amazing. I asked Andrew, did you ever meet your grandfather? He said, well, I was a little baby and he held me in his hands and we babbled to each other because this was after Marshall's surgery and he couldn't really speak. So he could just sort of do Finneganese babble. I said, Andrew, you're unique because you're one of the only people who communicated with Marshall in Finneganese. You know, that's highbrow. So we're going to start off with a couple round robin questions. And the first one is, what is the world made of? It's pretty simple, but I'll tell you where the question is rooted. Marshall McLuhan said, art is to show what the world is made of. If you missed, there's a clip from the January 6th Capitol riots in Washington, D.C., where a young human being, and we don't know if he was a militia dude or just someone who was there for this gathering, he looks into a TV camera and he yells, "You made me." I mean, that is the ultimate McLuhan Global Theater moment. This kid is yelling into the us viewers in the Global Theater, "You made me." Hey, we didn't make you. The TV didn't make you. Well, maybe it did. Who knows? So, Bill, we'll start with you. If Marshall said art is to show the world what the world is made of, how would you respond to that question? What is the world made of?
I would say it's made of misleading inferences and misapprehensions and misperceptions and concepts that are concretized cliches.
Man, that was great. But one big word, what was that contra word?
Concretized cliches.
Yeah, but what is
that are stuck in hardening cement the way a gangster would be have his feet in hardening cement before they throw him into the river.
Nice. So you're saying these are the cliches that stick, that don't go away.
Right.
That was brilliant. Okay, Clinton, what is the world made of?
I like that approach a lot. I often think of, everyone using know-how as a heuristic. Or a heuristic is something you do not because it is just because it works. Not necessarily because it's the right way to look at things logically, right? So yeah, it's made of metaphors and heuristics and know-how in a similar vein as to what Bill was just saying.
That was beautiful. You guys both, Clinton even backtracked and told us what that H word meant after I was going to say, what the heck does that word mean? So I mean, I've been sort of aware of Marshall for a good 50 years. I looked in my college notebooks once and I saw that one of my required readings was The Mechanical Bride, and it was right there next to Alan Watts' books. And I saw a lot of similarity, but I didn't get deep into McLuhan until maybe the 80s. Clinton's bio taught me he's only been into McLuhan for 4 years. Is that true, Clinton?
Summer 2017. So almost 4 years. Yeah.
That is amazing. And Bill, how many years? Now we already linked your article that so brilliantly captures your encounter with Marshall. But how many years would you say you've been studying or deep into McLuhan?
Since 1967.
1967. So that's a lot of years.
53 years.
53 years. I love it. So that's a lot. Okay, tell me one thing, one major element that stayed the same in your McLuhan studies and one major element that's changed in over 5 decades. Bill.
Okay, that's a very good one. That would require some serious thought. But off the top of my head, I would say is it something that's changed. I thought hot and cool were pretty cool once upon a time. I'm not so sure that's true anymore. What stayed the same? He had an understanding of change and technological change, which is head and shoulders beyond anybody else. That stayed the same.
Amazing. You must have ESP because my next question is about change. Bill, do you have ESP?
I don't have any idea.
Thank you. Okay, Clinton, 4 years, one major element of your McLuhan studies that have changed and one that stayed the same.
I was really collecting and just I'll put it this way. When I was reading McLuhan's more popular books for the first time, it's the sort of book where you read the first couple sentences of a paragraph, and then you know what all the words mean, and then you get halfway through the paragraph and you forgot the beginning, even though you knew what it meant, and then you go back to the top again, and then you never actually make it to the bottom of the paragraph trying to remember, and you realize you just have to keep reading and not remembering what it is you just read, right? The words kind of had this weird effect where it's impossible to keep in your head the way you could keep a real, so it sort of took it took years of slowly just having it drummed into me until I was able to, sort of form an understanding of a whole chapter or a whole, essay or review written by McLuhan from beginning to end as some coherent whole, right? Because they did not do that at all in my first reading of them. That's what made them so magical for me for the first, 2 years probably. But
he didn't write in paragraphs, Clinton. He wrote in streams of thought, very succinct streams of thought. Susan Sontag says aphoristic thinking is impatient thinking. He was the most impatient of thinkers and the most aphoristic.
Wait, hold on, Bill. Who said that aphoristic thinking line?
Susan Sontag.
Oh, Sontag. Say that line again slowly.
Aphoristic thinking is impatient thinking.
And continue your thought. Go ahead.
I was going to say that McLuhan was the most aphoristic of thinkers that we've heard since Nietzsche or Oscar Wilde. And he couldn't help himself. It came out in spurts. And he often surprised himself with one of those spurts. Even as a young man in his 1930 diary, when he was 19 years old, he commented that he often said things that he didn't understand at the time, but once he thought about them, they were true. And he had his impulses were often extremely inspired in ways he didn't fully understand.
Really well put, Bill. You know that you're a star of McLuhan mashups. You're getting this big time. Now back to Clinton. You're telling us what stayed the same and what changed? Which one were you articulating first, Clinton?
I was articulating what's changed.
And say it in a couple words first. What changed for you?
His writing holds together as a larger body now than just disjointed aphorism to aphorism by aphorism. I think it's sinking in.
Right, and then what stayed the same, Clinton?
Oh,
for you,
my see, because I've always been a computer guy first, and so when I was reading Gutenberg Galaxy, actually was the first book I read, and the ideas that were sort of glimmering through the cracks on the pages immediately told me lots of things about computers that I thought needed to be elaborated, and my first intuitions of what McLuhan was getting at, I think, pointed me right on the money, and I believe them now even more than I did when he convinced me then. So what McLuhan's saying about media, I got it immediately, and that hasn't changed. It's been a constant. I can hold to that while I'm exploring all this other stuff like English literature and French, symbolic poetry and all the other things you need to read about in order to sort of understand what it is that he put into his perceptions.
Yeah, Bill, if you ever want to react to Clinton's, just raise your hand, or I'll just go to the next question, because we're right there with you. We're appreciating your time. So, Bill, are you more afraid of old ideas or new ideas?
Wow, you ask interesting questions, sir.
Thank you.
Through that,
I'm not sure afraid is the operative word, but I'm apprehensive about old ideas, especially when they wear new clothes, such as nationalism, fascism, or white supremacy. Those ideas do unnerve me, and those are old ideas. I'm usually excited by new ideas more than I am afraid of them.
Yeah, well, just a side note, someone you probably know of or read, I.F. Stone said, typos are worse than fascism.
Is that because he made so many of them?
I don't know.
I used to subscribe to his newsletter, and it needed an editor.
Oh, did he need an editor? Oh, I don't. I just remember
that was my impression. These things were rushed out the door. Remember that documentary about him?
Yes.
His wife would be standing at a mailbox on the corner of a street with their arms piled up with newsletters about to go off, and they'd hold open the door and throw in as many as they could. And they got those out so fast, and they didn't give a hoot about proofreading them properly.
Yeah, I like that hoot word. That was a good one. I sensed another word coming out. Anyways, that really anticipated another great question, but we'll go to Clinton. Clinton, are you afraid of more afraid of old ideas or new ideas?
New ideas. If they're made by people who didn't already make sure darn sure to understand the old ones. Everyone sort of gets gets the very short summary version of whatever preceded their history, and if those summaries are wrong, or if those summaries get distorted, then whatever new thing they're thinking up, A, has probably already existed, B, under a different name that they have no idea where to go check the prior results to, and C, are what they think they know is probably right. So old ideas, we could say, I'm scared of old ideas misunderstood and badly summarized, and I'm scared of new ideas that result from that, I guess. Let's put it that way, since we're speaking generally.
Yeah, really good. So, Bill, just because we brought up I.F. Stone on a tangent, he has a line that I love to quote. He says, "The truth as I see it." This is objectivity and subjectivity. But I think it's more what Louis Buñuel said that I would love to hear both of yours reactions. Bill, you're up first. "I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it."
That's Buñuel or I.F. Stone?
That's Buñuel. I.F. Stone said, "The truth as I see it." So, I mean, it's sort of a double whammy there. You can respond to both, but more so the Buñuel.
I like the Buñuel. I like it very much.
But do you think Marshall was seeking the truth and he parted ways when people claim they found it? Because here's 85 to 90% of people respond as you do. "I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it." They go, "That's good." But I says, well, that's like, well, why should you seek the truth? Because if you're going to, it sounds like the journey and the destination, is the journey more important than the destination, or is the destination more important? And so, the cliche is, oh, the journey's more important. So why should you seek the truth if in the long run, you're not really going to find it?
You don't know that you're not going to find it. You hope you will find it. And the idea of seeking it is driven by the hope that you will find it.
Yeah, hope is a good word. Okay, Clinton, "I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it."
Well, at that point, are they perhaps like the dog who actually caught the car and then doesn't know what to do with it?
That's a good one. I don't even know that cliche.
Yeah, dogs chasing cars. Well, what would a dog do if it ever got it? So it's people probably have a bad habit of becoming absolutely insufferable after having claimed to found the truth, which would be right. And now they also would have to get a whole new hobby. So maybe to that regard, there's lots of wisdom there on just a very pragmatic sense.
Well, Bill, tell us, you actually met Marshall, and me and Clinton did not, and you summarized your meeting with him so well in an article that we linked people to, so you don't have to go too deep into that. But how did Marshall come across as a human being? Just
warm,
as
very warm guy, very
warm
and open, and very generous with his time and his thoughts and his perceptions and everything.
But did he?
The most striking thing I remember about him was how excited he was to show me a library. I've never seen anybody so excited in a library before. We went through the St. Michael's Library on the campus of the University of Toronto in 1970. And he couldn't get enough of patting down the library carrel shelves and sliding his hand over one of the shelves, and as if he were petting a dog or a child. And he was in love. You could see the rapture in the man's face. And he said, these carrels here at the St. Mike's Library can hold more books open at the same time than any of the other library carrels where I've taught or studied. And he compared it to the library carrels at Cambridge University, at the University of Wisconsin, at the University of St. Louis. They didn't even have them at the place where he taught in Windsor, Assumption College. They had just tables. He had to spread books out on a table. And he said it was so cold it didn't make any difference. That was during the war. Anyway, his thrill at showing me the library carols at St. Michael's, he gleamed, he glowed, his eyes sparkled. He was obviously talking about something he loved very, very, very much. And it shows when you read his works. He's constantly dovetailing from one source to another. His readings were omnivorous, and he was an encyclopedist when he read. He wanted to know about everything, and he worked it all into his own thinking and his own works. His idea of literary was very omnivorous. Literary could touch anything. There's a word that's used by Samuel Taylor Coleridge to describe the imagination that doesn't have any boundaries. He called it, I'm trying to remember the word. It's a lovely word, but you probably never heard it before. It will come back to me. Anyway, the imagination without any boundaries is very much McLuhan's idea of imagination. It extended everywhere that there are books, everywhere that there is any thinking, anywhere that there is any observation or fresh perception.
Fresh perception, boy, that's what we're after. We serve people fresh perceptions here at McLuhanMashUp. Hey, Bill, that was so articulate and down to earth, and it was indeed.
No, it wasn't. I couldn't remember the word I wanted.
Oh, no. Well, I was going to tell you what Marshall developed it into was center without margins.
Yeah.
So you leaving that gap is where the action is. That will cause our listeners and me and Clinton to find that Coleridge. We'll find it. It's not missing. We'll find it. But you explained it well, and you explained his warmth so well. Go ahead.
Esemplastic. That's the word. The esemplastic imagination. The
How do you
imagination
spell
that can take in anything and reaches in every direction. Universal
How do you spell
in its appetites.
Yeah. How do you spell that word?
ESEM plastic.
Wow. Thank you so much. See, it just took that little gap. The gap is where the action is. You found it, and you showed how you could see the warmth in him because you have warmth in yourself. But I was curious because to stay on our thought for a second, what would you think Marshall would say about the truth? Is he seeking the truth? Is that really what his aspiration was, or was he seeking something else?
I've been putting together a book of his quotations. I'm calling it the McLuhan Marshalling Machine. And there's a chapter on truth. And in that chapter, he describes truth as something that you make rather than find, and that is made with all the senses together, and that is a function of the creative imagination more than of matching. He was very down on the literary or the Gutenbergian structured way of thinking that things have to match, and one thing has to match another. He said making is much more important than matching.
Well, Gerry's got a one of his questions he often refers back to, which is
perception
reality? So
Yeah.
It seems to me that you could take what you just said there and come to the conclusion that if it's done right, if it's done proportionally, if it's to the right depth, you don't go too far, etc., etc.
No, that's good, Clinton. You really you did a retrieval there. So, Bill, that's a great one. How would you answer that? And because of your depth in studying Marshall's words, how would Marshall react to that question? Is perception reality? First Bill, then Marshall.
Cognition is more important than perception in terms of defining reality. And he considered recognition, or cognition, the repeat of cognition, a slightly more advanced stage than cognition. So there's perception, cognition, and recognition. which are almost 3 phases of the same process.
Mm.
There's an essay he wrote in 1954 called Catholic Humanism and Modern Letters,
Mm-hmm.
which defines a lot of this. And he was working through a lot of these problems more acutely in the 1950s than any other time in his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Well, Bill, go ahead, Clinton.
I like to think of recognition as you know, the second time you encounter anything, you've already saw it the first time, or you had to try and attempt to cognize it the first time. So every other reoccurrence of anything in your life is necessarily a recognition of that thing, right?
He quoted an Eliot and a couple phrases from an Eliot poem. We had the experience, but we missed the meaning. And he considered recognition the discovery of the meaning. The experience is the cognition and the perception and cognition, the first round, and the recognition is where the full meaning of an experience sinks in.
Really well. Go ahead, Clinton.
No, just shout out to Andrew McLuhan who's watching. He's in the chat here.
Good. So, Bill, that was brilliant. You really,
Andrew.
yeah, you're really grounded here, and so I appreciate that. So here's the thing: you mentioned those three, but let's go back to Bill himself. Pre 53 years ago, how would Bill answer is perception reality? Because then you told us how Marshall would answer it, and you probably would say that's how you would answer it now, today, 2021. But pre you knowing anything about Marshall, how would you have answered is perception reality?
I don't remember that guy very well. You're talking about somebody else.
Well, I would love to know him because I think you are a brilliant man. And I really appreciate how dang articulate you are without being highbrow and talking in this academic.
I'm not an academic. I'm a resolute non-academic.
You're a resolute.
My job is to make things, break them out of the ivory tower walls, to turn dusty old books into a brass band.
Oh my God! Whose metaphor is that?
Mine.
Into a brass band. We're really coming off the shoulders of the great jazz improvisers, John Coltrane, Ornette Coleman, Miles Davis. That's what we do in these sessions. So you're jamming right along. So that's funny because, Umberto Eco says, we stand on the shoulder of giants, but it's possible maybe we can even look further than them. High aspiration. So, this, let's go back a second to something you brought up that Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. Marshall said, I don't know what I think until I say it. What would Bill say? I don't know what I think until I
see it in proofed writing, ready to go to the publication.
Are you a proofreader for your 17 books?
I'm a very bad proofreader. I miss a lot.
Right, but in 17 books, you hire proofreaders?
When I can.
That's good. Well, I'm happy for Book of Probes, and we need your new books. And we're hoping the best for those new Marshall books. So, Bill, is thinking more innate in humans or more invented by humans?
We don't know the thoughts of whales and dolphins. We don't know the thoughts of ants. We don't know the thoughts of anyone other than humans, and that's because they can communicate. That's because of language. Without language, what are thoughts? They're dreams, really.
Yeah. That's good. Clinton. what's your perception? Don't think this time, Clinton. Just your collective hunch. Is thinking more innate or more invented?
Invented. My hunch.
Yeah.
We made it up.
We made it up.
Or it made itself up. Or it made us up.
Nice. Can you think without language, Bill?
Not very well.
Well, not very well thinking might be a good thing. What do you think, Bill? If you don't do good,
I'm trying to imagine situations where there is thought without language. You can communicate thought with the non-linguistic. There are graphics that communicate a lot, and they're not verbal at all. Sculptures, music. I guess there's a lot of thought in great music. You were talking about improvisations of jazz. Ornette Coleman or Miles Davis, they were able to communicate some very sweet thoughts solely through improvisational technique.
notice your hand gestures went there. That was amazing. So you did a couple senses thing there. Okay, so we'll go to Clinton first time. Clinton, Bill talked about the senses. We're going to sort of agree there's 5 major senses.
Sure.
What human activity happens when all 5 senses are sort of equally engaged?
Whoopee. If we're gonna talk like we're on Family Feud, yeah, the sex though. I can't really think of anything else.
Yeah, no, I like making whoopee. Now, okay, Bill, what's your answer to that question?
I wouldn't disagree with Clinton on that one.
But what else could we add? Because you were using your gesture there.
Okay, there's been studies of the hand gestures of Southern Italians and how much they communicate with their hands versus how much they communicate with their words. And it's been discovered that the hand element is much more sophisticated for them than the verbal element. So there you go. There's an example of nonverbal communication using the whole human body, using touch, using movement. It's almost a kind of dance that they make with their hands.
Yeah, actually, I've got that answer. Sex is usually the answer I get the most, but somebody said dance. You're using all 5 senses usually when you dance. When I go into my used bookstore twice a week in Santa Monica, Angel City Bookstore, the greatest bookstore in the world, it's all 5 senses. The smell of old books is amazing, intense.
Another one might be Medieval Times Dinner and Tournament.
Yes. And explain, suss that one out a little, Clinton. What do you mean?
I mean, dinner and a show is going to use all of your senses. And then also, if we want to generalize the medieval sensibility as more well-rounded in a sensory sense, that's just icing on the cake there.
Yeah. So, Bill, I wanted to go back to my studies of Alan Watts. He says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. And Marcel Duchamp said, there's no solution because there's no problem. So why do we have to uncover the hidden psychic effects of our inventions? Why aren't we just empowering those hidden psychic effects by uncovering them?
I think that goes back to an earlier question about what is the world made of, and I said it's made of misguided assumptions. And I think you've got a couple of misguided assumptions there, Jerry. Why do we have to? have to agree to those particular observations.
Yeah. I'm not asking you to agree to them. I'm just saying that it seems as though learning is something we all strive for. But Marshall said that between education and entertainment pleases us more, so it's more effective. Or no, he just says whatever pleases you more. So I'm just saying we want to learn and make the world better, but why don't we just let these inventions manipulate us? Why do we have to understand how they're manipulating us? What good does that do, Bill? Bill, can you?
Somnambulists, and we walk around in a daze, unaware of what we're doing with our technologies. And if you apply his thinking to 21st century technologies, look at all the side effects of social media, from ADHD to the breakup of civilized conversation in American politics. Those can all be attributed to modern media.
Yeah. No, that's a good answer. And Clint, you should tell me yours because you're studying this stuff deep. And why in the heck do so? You know, your friends are just wallowing in it and having fun. Does it cause more anxiety for you, or what is it? You know, what's the side effect and what's the real hidden reason you do it?
Computers have always been for me something that you own and take apart and figure out because they're infinitely customizable and variable and changeable and programmable. And yet, that didn't sell very well in the 70s and 80s. No one bought them for those reasons. People bought them to, play Missile Command and asteroids and maybe get their taxes done, right? So now that's what people buy computers for, is to do their taxes and talk to people like a telephone. And the content of the computer now is all the affordances of the older analog environment, and that's the only reason anyone has one. And otherwise, who cares what this thing is or what it's for, right? So that's
don't underestimate Pornhub.
Oh, heck, the internet is for porn. That's definitely
that's always driven new media.
Yep.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Back to the demise of Betamax, right? As the story goes.
But even for literature, right? I mean, even for painting, cave paintings, print manuscripts, printed word.
I guess D.H. Lawrence probably sold more than a few books. Yeah, exactly. So these are well, there you go. That's a very old thing as the content of the new environment. Nevertheless, there's all sorts of facets of computer ownership that people completely give up and leave it to some corporation to manage for them, and then complain to the corporation when their computer is exposing them to ideas they don't want, or when the computer is spying on them, or when the computer, right? Hey, why are you making my computer do this to me? And my approach is, you bought it, it's yours. You're letting them do it to you, right? But at the same time, it's one of the most complex devices we've ever invented, let alone commoditized and given to everyone and their mother. So now expecting everyone and their mother to learn the nuts and bolts of how to take care of their own machine and not trust people to screw them over with it is a very tall order for me to go and make. So that's kind of my where I'm hamstrung. So yes, people are going to be somnambulists and let Facebook or Google or Twitter tell them what to think and hide some news from them and pump other news in their face, and they're just going to go with it because all they cared about was finding out whatever the weather was. It is somnambulism. It is a surrender to a medium they own but don't control. It's going to take generations.
They think they do.
Oh, they think they do because
we're in control of our attention. We're not.
Not at all.
The technologies are all about grabbing our attention and owning it and taking it over.
Yeah, the attention economy.
You've seen The Social Dilemma, I trust, both of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have. I wrote a lengthy review because it was very good, but it's also there's some implicit things in that movie. What about everyone else? Sorry for people who haven't seen it. Spoiler alert, but I guess everyone else in their little pod was doing fine, except for the one guy who went radical. Right? Everyone else, they're okay. We like them in their pod, nice and safe. But there's one kid. He went wrong. Let's focus on what went wrong with him. Right? All these little implicit things. Right?
Yeah.
So.
But
yeah.
isn't it true, Bill, and in the long run, if we uncover these hidden psychic effects, as Pound taught Marshall, then we can learn to cope with what we don't like about them. So, this coping thing is important. So, doesn't the rise in fake news or disinformation or whatever you want to call it enable us to sharpen our media literacy skills and become better critical thinkers? So
well,
then we
I have a hunch about the 21st century.
Go ahead.
What's your hunch, Bill?
I'm right. What can go wrong with so-called fake news and the manipulation of news, and fakery as a powerful manipulator of human behavior, and that's our adolescence, and we're learning to overcome it, and we're learning how toxic it can be early on in this century. So maybe we'll have inoculation against it as greater and greater waves of it come washing over us. We haven't seen yet the result of artificial intelligence deep fakes, where they can have Biden, for example, making a deal with the Chinese that never happened, but they would have convincing video of it. And that's just around the corner. I don't know how soon around the corner, but it's coming. McLuhan wasn't afraid of that at all. He said news more than art is artifact.
Yeah, and Eric so well put that the word fake is based and rooted in Latin to make. Yeah, to make, and what's the other way? It means to fact. The word fact is also rooted in to make. So fact
is the origin of fact and fake. Yes.
Yes. Right. So but what you just said was really important, Bill, because isn't that what words did? Is that deep fake videos are so much worse than words? What's the difference?
Here's the question. Was language invented so we could lie? Did lying come as a deeper layer consequence of language, or was it the starting point of language? There's a whole school of thought that says that we invented language so we could lie to one another. And I think the same can be said of social media.
Very well put. Social media started with the telegraph. That's electronic communication. First, spoken word, printed word, and electronic word. So what you brought up was really important. Bill, I ask people constantly in lectures, in discussions, I says, what's the first human invention? And this art kid in Flint, Michigan goes, oh, lying. He said that was the first human invention. And I thought that was an interesting concept. So
he's pretty dead on.
He's pretty dead on. It was amazing, but lying infers a negative thing. So we'll go with this question next. Bill, on what occasion do you lie? That's from Marcel Proust, by the way.
Only that's utterly unavoidable.
Good answer. Clinton, on what occasion do you lie?
when telling the truth would require writing a book worth of context building. Sometimes you just let people think what they think, and you assume their projections, even if they don't represent you. If you think that you're talking to with someone who's from such a different mindset than that, common ground would take the building of an entire freaking relationship and a kumbaya session and a summer retreat to to a summer camp or something in order to actually meet common ground to then tell the truth about something with them.
Well, that was a good word, common ground, because it's figure ground relationship. But Bill, that was pretty amazing. I think we found your publisher. Clinton said, well, you got to write a book. So Clinton's admitting he could be the publisher of your McLuhan books. Let's stay on top of them. Cough up the big bucks there, Clinton.
Well, okay.
It doesn't. The beauty of now is it doesn't cost that much to make books.
That's true.
Yeah, even the major authors are doing their books, self-published because they can control them better than with publishers. So, but that was amazing what you said about lying, because if we're on that through line of truth and then lying, and these are polar opposites, but we want to put value judgments and say, well, I'm seeking the truth, but I'm not lying, and books like Finnegan's Wake create such a deep reinvention of the entire reading process. So I think that's why Marshall was so influenced by Finnegan's Wake. In fact, he probably was one of the only people who broke the Finnegan's Wake code, because it's even theorized by Bob Dobbs that the CIA studied the Wake to invent MK Ultra mind control. And that's not that far off. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. That concept alone could be possible, that you could study what Finnegan's Wake did to Marshall, and so many of the media ecology scholars don't seem to understand what Joyce did with printed word. He was a printed word artist. And so is lying, the bottom line, Bill, I'm trying to get to you to tell me about the senses, and Clinton too, is the visual sense more impactful than the hearing sense? So what Joyce did with a book, which is a visual experience, you look at printed word, you look at the printed word. That's the visual sense, is the dominant sense. And
Joyce said you won't understand the book unless you read it out loud. Didn't he
that's
say
what
that in Finnegan's Wake?
That's exactly what I'm getting to. He changed the medium, this experience of consuming the medium of his book, is that you have to look at the words as they're mispronunciated out loud. So he turns an eye experience into an ear experience. So the question is, Bill, is I experience watching fake news. Biden does a agreement with China and it's all been faked on video. Is the visual experience more impactful than the auditory experience? I know it's both and it depends, but go ahead. You talk about it and then Clinton will talk about it. What do you think, Bill?
I think that when that starts to happen and the experts can't tell when it's fake and when it's real, I think we're going to be crossing an important threshold at that point. And beyond that threshold, who knows? But beyond
Yeah.
that threshold lies tyranny and authoritarianism and somebody who says, I know, and you have to take my word for it. That will be one of the upshots of that kind of a confusion, I think. It will have terribly awesome political implications.
Right. Hold on, Clinton, for a second, because I just want to follow up with Bill. But isn't that that confusion, that upshot, that threshold, an enabler for us to develop our critical thinking skills even more?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's a reason that McLuhan called George Orwell an old duffer who was writing about, an age that had already happened 40 years previous to his publication of 1984 and I think 1948, right? I think it was. And that's
Yeah, he wrote it in 48.
Yeah.
And he flipped the year.
And yeah, right. And McLuhan said, he's writing about the past. So this has already happened long ago, right? Probably drawing on Wyndham Lewis. If we already accept that news and journalism as it has been a giant smokescreen of, you could say, manufactured consent and image making and carefully made packaged icons, with images developed by publicists, and the whole rigmarole has been a sort of a farce all along. Let alone so then to I'm curious how much critical thinking is too critical, because the people who, for instance, if growing up on the internet, you can go find all the original scientific papers that gets cited when you read a magazine article. It would have been very hard 30 years ago if an activist handed you a pamphlet and they cited, oh, this study performed by these people in the journal of whatever. You would have had to get on a bus and go to a library and spend half an hour tracking down this paper to go and see whether the activist was lying to you through abusing statistics or whatever, or if the magazine article was just trying to sell you a crappy medicine and because the advertisers wanted it that way. What the internet's done is let people fact check the fact checkers and critically examine the critical thinkers. And if newspapers are the first draft of history, then that means we should expect them all to recant everything they said about last year and rewrite it once all the new facts come to light. But instead, news as it is already sort of a circular referential, having to stay continuity with the story they published yesterday with the story they published last week. And I think this is precisely the postmodern world of the somnambulists, who comprise the mainstream so-called socially constructed view of the world, right? And that's what the internet is sort of ripping apart with its sending people off to political extremism merely by virtue of giving them a means to peer behind the curtain or double check or go look at footage someone captured on their phone to decide whether or not the media is reporting an event or a protest or a riot or a speech as it was presented in its full sense. So that's what we're witnessing here. Critical thinking means spending your time fact checking everyone, and who the hell has that kind of time? Who has that kind of attention span? Who has that attention span to sit there and go double check every single thing in every morning newspaper, right? For crying out loud, right?
That's it. Clinton, you asked two major questions, and we want to hear from Bill, because that's the name of one of my films is from a Bob Dobbs line. Who's jamming the culture jammers? Like, who's critically thinking about the critical thinkers? That's like the Wizard of Us instead of the Wizard of Oz. Who's pulling the curtain? So, Bill, you heard Clinton's two questions. Can we overthink? Can we do too much critical thinking? What's your take on that, Bill?
I don't think the danger is doing too much. I think the danger is doing too little.
Mm.
I'm blown away that nobody is calling out Marjorie, what's her name, Taylor Greene, on the fact that the most important thing she's picked up from Trump isn't right-wing lunacy. It's how to get attention. She's learned his attention grabbing techniques and his self promotion brilliantly. She's she's his truest follower and acolyte in that respect.
Check this out, Bill.
What?
Check this out for 1 second. In 1972, Marshall put out a book called Take Today the Executive as Dropout. He
I
said
know it well.
the word makes the market. 5 words. He explains the White House. He explains Trump in 5 words. That's why Steve Bannon said a few years ago, Trump is the most McLuhan-esque president. Well, guess what? Every president is McLuhan-esque because they all know the word makes the market.
So he
what
said
you just
he said on Playboy, in the Playboy 1969 interview, I will give you the exact reading of it. He said, the political candidate who understands TV, whatever his party goals or beliefs, can gain power unknown in history. He said that to the Playboy interviewer.
Yeah.
And I
Very
think we're
well.
looking at Trump right there.
Yeah.
Or what Trump wanted to be.
Yeah. No, so that
got derailed from being.
Yeah. And you put it very well. What can we do about it, Bill?
What Clinton was talking about, critical thinking and media literacy and awareness. We have to be aware of what we're doing. If you're aware of it, you're not a somnambulist.
Right. I don't know. I think the rabbit holes can go really deep once you invest the time. I feel the nomadic experience of moving around and trying to step inside the shoes of opponents is a lot more challenging and tends to really be a lot more abysmal insofar as trying to decide that, like we were saying earlier, whether or not you're someone who thinks they've found the truth or not on matters of a scope so complex of geopolitics and national policy and you know and all of nature and all of science. It's because we mentioned the social network. It's interesting because you can see how they sort of used. You remember the Matrix movies? They sort of built on that style, that aesthetic of having everyone in their own little pod there. But in the Matrix movies, you wanted to wake up out of the Matrix. But at the end of the social network, you just wanted the algorithm to be nicer and to become your friend at the end while you stayed in your little pod. Right? I think it's a telling difference.
Have you seen that Tim Cook of Apple has challenged those algorithms? He made a speech in Europe not long ago where he said, we can't accept this. This is not the way for the technology to progress. This is all about manipulating and controlling and turning people's behavior over to advertisers' control.
Right.
And he said that's not the function of these forms of technology. And he was aiming directly at Zuckerberg and Facebook, but he didn't mention them by name. But the editorial writers who picked up on it claim that this could be the beginning of the end of Facebook's dominance.
See, and that's interesting because if you buy an iPhone, Tim Cook, to be synectical, Tim Cook controls what's on your iPhone. He tells you what you're allowed to get from the App Store and what's not allowed to be in the App Store. So he's got the keys to your phone already. So So now that's what puts him in a position to have this sort of power to say, you will have Facebook or you will not have Facebook, or you will have Parler or you will not have Parler, or you will have, right? So on the one hand, it's probably good PR to kick Facebook while they're down and come off like the white knight charging in to save us all from fake news. And at the same time, what you're being saved from is also having to listen to, your crazy Uncle Fred, who you can barely stand every Thanksgiving when he comes over and starts harping at you about some conspiracy theory that you just want him to shut up and eat his turkey already. But that's what you're being saved from, is contact with, other people with ideas that are bad, right? So the fact that Tim Cook holds those keys in the first place, so that he can then, save you from yourself from using your own phone wrong, because he gets to tell you what to do with it. I mean, that's the level I like to look at things, and it's a lot more murky ethically and morally, because I know if people fully controlled all their computers and were as empowered as they could be, absolute hell would be unleashed. It's almost a good thing you can't do very much more than your phone than what the paternalistic corporations let you do. Because heavens knows you'd find a way to blow up the world if you used it to its full potential, right?
Blowed it up really good. Thank you, Clinton. And Bill, let's switch to a second and just morph into McLuhan marshaling the machine. What a great word you got for your book, is you turn marshal into a verb. That's Bucky Fuller. I seem to be a verb. The American Indians say that they have no nouns. They only have verbs. So I love you turning Marshall's name into a verb, marshaling. You say Marshall was a systems thinker, not systematic. How does that relate to our discussion here?
Where
Bill,
did you find me saying that?
I believe it's in your Global Village Day. If not, I'm not exactly sure. My notes don't. I took some notes when you were on the Global Village Day, which should have been called the Global Theater Day. And by the way, you were one of the superstars that day because you were grounded and real, and I appreciate it. But how do you just process? Is Marshall a systems thinker or systematic, and what's the difference?
I don't think he's either. I think he's a purely pointillistic dabbler in every direction he went in. He tried this and he tried that. His thinking was a poet's thinking. If you read William Blake, you'll get a better understanding of McLuhan. He was trying to. Blake wrote it somewhere where he said, "I will not be enslaved by any system. I must invent my own," and that's kind of McLuhan's. So he's running away from systematic thinking, and in such a way that he creates his own highly mosaic structure of thinking. But it's not a complete way of thinking. I mean, he doesn't. He suffers the same thing of self-educated autodidacts. He's got holes in his entire apparatus. There are questions you can ask of McLuhan that he does not have answers for. How do you define the truth would be one of them.
Yeah. No, that is well put. You really laid it down, because T.S. Eliot said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. How do you think Marshall would have said, if I asked him, what language is your inner dialogue in, Marshall? What would he say, Bill?
He would have made a quip. I'm not sure what the quip would be, but he would turn that one around on you somehow and make a wisecrack.
Yeah, I asked Gerry Snyder, the beat poet, can you tell me what language your inner dialogue is in? He goes, no. which taught me I should have said, please tell me what language your inner dialogue is in. So, Bill, let's just say to you, what language is your inner dialogue in?
Let me come back to you with what language McLuhan's would be in, that of the symbolist poets.
Yeah.
I think he found so much affinity to them because his own thinking and his own intuitions and his own lunging explorations were very much like theirs, that he felt such affinity.
Yeah, you're right on it, because a friend of mine writes for the New York Times, playwright, successful author, and he wanted to join our McLuhan group. He says, "What should I read?" And I goes, "That doesn't matter. Just look at any of them." He looked at a little of Marshall and he says, "That guy's a poet." He didn't say, "Oh, he's a great media theorist." He said, "Oh, he's a poet."
He is, yes.
Yeah. But he
didn't write. He
disguised.
didn't. I like what John Cage said about him. He's
What?
the first great critic, great imaginative critic, and he uses the opportunities of a literary critic, but turns them into a form of higher poetry.
Wow. Can you send me that quote? That is amazing. Cage on McLuhan. That's brilliant. But it is amazing that Marshall, I feel Donald Thiel nails it, and he says that Marshall was teasing people to believe his percepts were concepts, because he existed in the academic literature world. So if you said, "Oh, Marshall, you're a media theorist," in Wikipedia, they say media theorist. And he goes, "No, he didn't. I'm not a media theorist," but he would go along with it. What do you think of that, Bill?
He didn't. He objected if you called him a theorist. He objected if you called his ideas theories. I had this problem with him in 1971 when I sent him the chapters of my book, The Post-Industrial Prophets, and he reacted quite negatively. It's in the book of letters what he said to me. They published the letter, and he was he was pretty hostile, and he blasted me all over the place. In fact, his blasts are very useful in the assembling the McLuhan marshalling machine, because they fit certain themes and they say very succinctly what needs to be said for those themes.
Well, that's effects precede causes. He knew you needed to do that. But I'm saying, in the big picture, do you agree with Thiel saying he teased people to believe?
And I think that's a beautiful phrasing of it.
Yeah, that's really good. And so, I feel that alchemy is partly to explain Marshall. And I dumpster dove this book today, Late Night Thoughts on Listening to Mahler's Ninth Symphony by Lewis Thomas, who wrote Lives of a Cell, a brilliant writer.
I love Lewis Thomas.
Yeah, he's a brilliant
essayist.
Yeah, and he says alchemy began long ago as an expression of that deepest and oldest of human wishes to discover that the world makes sense. He's saying that's the human wish, and that alchemy is an expression of that wish to discover that the world makes sense. Bill, does the world make sense?
To McLuhan, it did. Everything related to everything else. This is the esemplastic imagination. Another phrasing would be Baudelaire calling the world a forest of resemblances. That everything comes to resemble something else. McLuhan's great ambition after 1940, when he finished the Nash thesis, was to prove to the world that analogy could be as powerful as logic, and that it could go where logic couldn't go. And that because logic broke things down and made things smaller and more separate, but analogy united everything. It kept leaping from one domain to another and connecting one thing to another and showing the depth of connectivity in all things. So to Marshall, the world did make sense, and he considered everything hung together somehow. And his great ambition was to find out how and to show where it all happened. Do you know anything about his great unfinished work, the 20th Century Baedeker?
Tell us about it.
Well, it started in 1948. He had an epiphany. What if he did a book that showed how the great advances in the arts anticipated and were identical to the same advances in the sciences. And his best example was in 1900, when Max Planck published on quantum mechanics and Freud published on the nature of the unconscious. And he said that both of these are about discoveries of worlds that are discontinuous and follow rules that we don't understand. And he wanted to do this in all domains, show the relationship between cubism and photography in the arts in the 1920s, particularly the writings of T.S. Eliot and James Joyce.
Yeah, that's very true.
To apply the esemplastic imagination to all the advances of the 20th century and show their interconnection and interrelationships. He was very down on C.P. Snow's The Two Cultures, which argued, a book published in the 1950s that was very popular at the time, which argued that the arts and the sciences had taken two opposite directions, and they were not in any way talking to each other or capable of talking to each other. McLuhan felt just the opposite, that they were talking to one another and that they informed one another, and that the great advances in science were prefaced and there were precursors going on in the arts. For example, the work of Edgar Allan Poe in inventing the detective story and showing that the effect precedes the cause. That would later become a foundation of modern physics and modern chemistry.
No, that was brilliant, Bill. And we're coming to our 90-minute limit, and we would love to have you back. Like, how about every week, Bill? You are our superstar. You put this in common terms. So just you can go with the through line of what you just said, because Eric released a book, or they released this amazing book called The Lost Tetrads of Marshall McLuhan. It is such a cute little book, you know. That's a nice little book. I love this book.
I've got it. Yeah.
It says that poetry is the tetrads a cross between poetry and hieroglyphics. That is amazing. We do you should join us. We do tetrads 4 times a week with people all over the world on Zoom. And it's just such a fun game. It's like Hollywood Squares game show on Zoom, all based on Marshall's 4 questions. Or, he just sort of hijacked these questions.
The unasked question and the unanswered question about the tetrads that he and Eric pursued for quite a while is what is the number 5 law of media? He was always convinced there were more than the tetrads, but he never found the 5th one or later ones. And I would put that out to anybody watching this.
Yeah, we do that all
of media.
Yeah, we do that all the time. Don't settle for 4. There's a whole article that explores it. There's a lot of essays on it, or there's a few essays on it, but one is, what does it satirize, is a fun 5th one, and there's other ones. But here's my question to you, Bill, is if the tetrad is a combination of poetry and hieroglyphics, and Marshall called the laws of media the new science, can you compare and contrast what poetry is and what science is? How are they similar and how are they different?
If you go back to Francis Bacon and Novum Organum, where he tried to create a science based on analogy. You've got a similar thing going on with McLuhan and the laws of media. He was trying to discover how you can pursue the science of media based on analogy, the science of new technologies and new innovations, understanding them based on analogy and the effects of them.
Bill, this has been delightful. I wanted to read you something that you know well, but it's good for the people to listen. This is Marshall McLuhan. We are polluting art as fast as we are tidying up nature. The people of the earth are encouraged to engage in an experiment of utmost urgency. We must turn off the electronic environment for a period of 1 week to perform a cleansing of mass humans' minds, body, and spirit. We must get back to our bodies, lest we forget that they are still there. Imagine the freedom to be experienced as the top-down cultural control of civilization is eradicated for even the briefest moment. If everyone did participate in the media fast, how would we know it happened? Stay tuned. So, your take on this idea of Marshall's media fast, Bill?
Could I ask you the source on that? That's a quote I haven't heard. I'm surprised that you know something I don't. I'm delighted. I'm thrilled.
I will do the research where it came from, but I don't have, I just put it out as a flyer, and
Right.
At the bottom I put how, why, when, where, when, and wow. But it's
It could be
it's
apocryphal. I'm not sure he said it. Are you
Yeah.
absolutely sure he said it?
I'm absolutely sure about nothing, but I'm a student, so I'm always investigating. But I'm just saying, your idea of the media fast, doing without something to figure out what it does. It's like Joyce writing a book that's not a book, or Duchamp making a piece of art that's not a piece of art, or Cage making a piece of music that's not music. That's indeed like fasting from something you're engaged in. We know we're in deep in a world swirling maelstrom of media, MOM, but can we literally turn off our cell phones for a day and then figure out what happened to us, or talk about what happened to us? The idea seems good, but Clinton's shaking his head. No, we can't.
No, that's not what I mean. I mean, that's
Most of us
the wrong
can't.
solution.
Most
Yeah.
of us can't.
No,
I think it's a very useful exercise, though.
Yeah. Okay, Clinton, then he's saying it's a useful exercise. I would agree. But Clinton, you can respond now because we sort of interrupted your response. Go ahead.
Oh no, it's fasting. The metaphor of fasting from technology would make sense as if people were actually using the technology to begin with, but they're not. For 40 years, no one's actually been using their computer except programmers. Let's put it that way. No one uses their computer anyway, so you can't take a fast from something you were never using to begin with. Everyone's just using the content of the computer. They're using their new camera. They're using their new typewriter. They're using their new telephone. No one's using the computer, has not touched the reality of their physical actual media if they never delved into computers as a topic in and of itself. So I'd say get deeper into the media, and then you can take a fast from it, and then you might understand what some of the effects are.
Yeah. No, that's good, because in our
very McLuhanist response.
Thank
we're
you.
using the computer for old stuff, not new stuff. We haven't yet discovered what it's good for.
I think so.
That's the blessing of the veteran thinker McLuhanite Bill saying, Clinton, you got it going, dude. So in closing, we want to thank you both, and we'll ask both of you, how can McLuhan resolve the troubles in the global theater today, Bill?
Can I make a pitch for something here?
Oh, pitch on, dude.
Friend of
We
mine
love
has
it.
written the best book on media of the last 10 years. Do you know this book at all, Gerry?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I know Powell, but I mean I haven't interviewed him yet. He's on our list and I've met him and I know how important this book is because you showed it at the Global Village Day and please tell us. Give the pitch. Why is it important?
This book is to social media television. This book is to social media what understanding media was to television. It's a big breakthrough in understanding the nature of social media and what social media is really all about, which is the early ganglia of a new neural consciousness that stretches over the globe. What McLuhan called the growth of global or corporate consciousness. In fact, the phrase global membrane is from his piece on William Burroughs in 1963.
From Nation Magazine?
Yes.
Oh,
Wonderful essay.
That is one of the most amazing essays I require reading because it covers the wake and Burroughs, and that is an amazing. So that's interesting because is that Tehil Chardin a little based also, meaning the
Noosphere,
noosphere?
yeah, the noosphere. It's the same idea, or roughly the same idea.
And put it in layperson's term. What does the noosphere or global membrane mean in layperson's terms?
Think of it, we're all transistors in some new kind of global computer. The computer can have thoughts that we don't understand, that we contribute to, and we're parts of, but we're only very evanescent elements in creating. We're like switches in this vast supercomputer that is constantly generating understandings well beyond our ken. We're inventing God.
Woo! Is that a small G or a big capital G?
It can be capital if you want.
Small. I'll go with small.
A friend of mine, Jim McAleer, let me tell you a story about. He invented the molecular computer. He made a patent in 1987 for the first cell-based computer, and his idea was that you can grow new kinds of computers the way you grow things in petri dishes. And there's a lot of research going on along these lines right now, just like there is in quantum computing, molecular computing. Anyway, Jim was sitting outside church one day, and his wife was in the church, and the priest came out and said, "Jim, you're not going to join us in the congregation?" And Jim said, "No, I don't think so." And the priest said, "Well, can I ask you a personal question, Jim? Do you believe in God?" And Jim had the most wonderful riposte. He said, "Not only do I believe in an almighty God, Father, but I know how to build one."
Oh no.
That is a great answer. How do you spell his last name? Jim what?
McAleer, McAlear.
That is beautiful. I know how to build a God.
Not only do I believe in, and I don't believe in an almighty God, but I know how to build one.
One, yeah.
See, that's always a statement on the disposition of the somnambulists who aren't going to be able to understand the artifact for what it is, right? Icons and artifacts and complex machines only become deified to those who don't understand them. That's sort of my that's my riposte to the idea that we're cells in a giant computer. Only if you're stuck in the content of the computer, not if you're in the world where the computer is just one more object on your shelf or on your desk or in your pocket.
I don't think we have the faintest idea what computers are, but we won't until Something like a quantum computer makes a vast breakthrough and changes our whole perception of time and space, such as you're going to get with entanglement.
That's true. Although we can start with what computers were. And what they were 50 years ago was still an amazingly complex contraption whose influence has been vastly understated. Right, the language we use. Oh, those big old computers that used to be the size of a building. Ha ha! They were some of the old vacuum tubes. They were so slow. My calculator's faster than that. Ha ha ha! The way we talk about technology that's old as if it was not incredibly, amazingly powerful and complex and doing millions of things a second, even back then. Right, when we denigrate technology by buying into the marketing hype that tells us, oh, things are going so fast, then we underestimate the influence computers have already had all along. That's the danger there. But that's just my that's what I'm always going to be circling back to, I think, in these discussions. So this has been awesome. Thank you. Bill, was there anything you wanted to say about your book, Marshalling McLuhan? Is it coming out soon?
The McLuhan marshalling machine. No,
McLuhan marshalling machine. Yes.
I don't know when it will be coming out, but it's not even finished yet. I'm still cleaning up the chapters and trying to trim it back. It's much too long.
No, it's not.
It's got a lot of stuff in it. It's very loaded.
That's excellent.
Well, we love the previews on McLuhan Galaxy, and Bill, we love you, and we love you, Clinton. This has been an amazing time. You know, we started in a sort of improv jazz session, and one of the great jazz heroes to me is Fats Waller. He said, "One never knows, do one." And we're more than just one. We are an amazing global theater. And we're the stage is set, and we're acting away and sweeping up in the back room and having a lot of fun. So I wanted to tell you that yesterday in our Finnegan's Wake Reading Club, we had all these references to Bruno. And boy, Bill, you've gotten deep into Bruno. So someday we should do another session on Bruno and his influence on Marshall. And that crossover, I'm sure Marshall influenced Bruno too. And Marshall called it complex clairvoyance. So in closing, I'll thank God for Marshall McLuhan. What you doing, Marshall McLuhan, as they said and laughing. He said, communication of the new is a miracle, but not impossible. And you two gentlemen have proved that. We've communicated some new blood in my solar system here, and I'm grateful. Thank you so much, Bill. Thank you so much.
Very much. Thank you very much, Gerry. Thank you.